Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, November 18th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Mo Schwanunu.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, officially today apparently is National Princess Day, where everyone has a right to be a princess. So I know behind you in your new podcast studio setup, you declare yourself queen. Today is Princess Day, so I take that.
Well, first of all, this pillow was bought for me by a friend of mine. But I'm into it. I keep it. It's up.
It's over your shoulder. For those of you who watch on YouTube, it's right over Jill's right shoulder. Queen of blank everything. You might have seen these pillows around.
Oh, no, I thought I'm the only one who has it, Mosh.
Right, there's only one queen of everything.
Well, happy Princess Day to all of those who celebrate, especially the little girls out there.
Yes, for those little girls wearing their Elsa costumes every day of the year.
We tried for a long time, and I know my sister-in-law did as well, to not really talk about princesses or be into the Disney princesses with our girls. But it just happens. I don't even know how. It just takes over. So yes, for everyone who is celebrating, you enjoy today.
Yes, your inner royal comes out today.
Okay, let's get to some news and about face from President Trump when it comes to the Epstein files. He now says he will sign a bill releasing them if Congress passes said bill.
Which appears to be a fait accompli at this point.
To education and a story getting a ton of reaction over on our Instagram platform. A lot of schools have banned smartphones. But what about Chromebooks and laptops? One educator is sounding the alarm.
And you have many opinions about it, teachers, parents, and it's one of those issues, Jill, where like 99% of the notes all go in one direction.
A big visit to the White House today. This time it is Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman. What to expect as the president already says he'll be making a huge military sale to the kingdom. Also
some soccer royalty at the White House today, Cristiano Ronaldo. It'll be a big day over there at 1600 Pennsylvania.
An update on the nation's airports. The FAA says it is business as usual post-shutdown.
And we'll tell you about the White House proposal to scrap the Biden plan that would have required airlines to give us cash payments for delayed or canceled flights. We'll tell you what's behind it.
To the economy, this could be the worst job market for new college grads in years.
And at the same time, the job market is heating up, but for jobs that you usually don't want.
And a new Ken Burns documentary now out, all about the American Revolution. We have a bit on that, including Moshe's interview with the legendary producer and director.
Yeah, why he thinks that the American Revolution was the biggest event in world history since the birth of Jesus Christ.
And speaking of world history, Moshe has on this day in history
a very special 97th birthday for a certain animated character.
All right, the House is expected to vote today to force the release of the investigative files related to the late convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Passage is basically guaranteed after President Trump dropped his longstanding opposition late Sunday. Seeing himself on the losing side of this battle, his late reversal came days after a House petition gathered enough support to force a vote. So this is a rare instance where a few House Republicans defied the president's wishes. Trump saying in the Oval Office Monday that he'll sign the bill, which will call for the Justice Department to release the files.
So I'm for I don't. They can do whatever they want. We'll give them everything. Sure, I would. Let the Senate look at it. Let anybody look at it. But don't talk about it too much because honestly, I don't want to take it away from us. It's really a Democrat problem. The Democrats were Epstein's friends, all of them, and it's a hoax. The whole thing is a hoax.
Despite the fact that it was his key allies and now administration officials like FBI Director Kash Patel and Attorney General Pam Bondi calling for transparency on the issue last year while on the campaign trail, the administration has put the kibosh on the release of most of those files while they have been in charge. It has been an issue that many Trump supporters have been disappointed in. It's created one of the biggest divides among his MAGA supporters during his administration. Until the weekend, Trump and his staff had lobbied hard to prevent any further release of those files from the criminal investigation by the U.S. Justice Department into Epstein. He was friends with Trump for a couple of decades until they had a falling out around 2004. Democrats and even some of Trump's supporters say there is nothing hoax-like in the release of authentic Justice Department records. Epstein was convicted on several Florida state and federal charges related to his sexual abuse and trafficking of teenage girls. He died in a federal jail cell in Manhattan in 2019. It was ruled a suicide a few weeks after he was arrested on new federal charges of sex trafficking children back during the first Trump administration.
So the change of heart from Trump was announced on Sunday night. He was on the tarmac, headed back to the White House, and said he's grown exasperated with Republicans' fixation on this issue. He wants to focus on the cost of living, on the economy, on issues that he believes matters more to voters, and this has become a distraction. He says he has nothing to hide on this, though interestingly, Jill, he doesn't need the legislation. He's the president. He could just tell the Justice Department to release more. But he did see basically the fact that he was going to lose. And Trump does not like to be on the losing side of things. And so ultimately he flipped here and said, you know what, release them all. And you saw him in the Oval Office yesterday. You just heard a clip of that where he's like, you know what, just it should all come out. It needs to all come out so we can all move on from this, because the story now has lasted several months and continues to bubble up and continues to create a divide within his own party amongst his own supporters. So this resolution that the House is voting on, likely today, will then go to the Senate, will then go to his desk. And it does say that the Justice Department can withhold or redact any information identifying victims. So how much will ultimately get released? How much will be redacted here? It also comes in the aftermath of the fact that Trump on Friday called for the Justice Department to investigate prominent Democratic ties to Epstein, which would effectively open the door to U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi saying, well, we got an active investigation now. I can't release more stuff. So we might go through this whole process on Capitol Hill, have Trump sign it, and then not see much here. So we'll see what comes of it. It is interesting. Trump only wants the Justice Department to investigate Democratic ties to Jeffrey Epstein, because there are Republicans who are tied to Jeffrey Epstein. Among the emails that were released last week, well, Trump was mentioned in a couple of them by Jeffrey Epstein, given their history. And you do see, vast majorities of Democrats and Republicans who just want it all out there at this juncture. Again, it's not clear how much more can be revealed here, how much more is speculation, accusations versus, firm evidence. There was a question over the summer as to why they didn't release more of the files. And one of the things that people speculated on is that there's just a lot of names thrown out, but without much proof, which could lead to defamation and other concerns for the Justice Department, because these are just accusations that haven't been fully adjudicated or investigated here. Now, among the emails that came out last week, Jill, we've been talking about this. There was one from Epstein where he refers to Trump in an email saying he knew about the girls. No other clarifying information around that email. Remember that Trump and Epstein, they were buddies in the 80s, the 90s, early 2000s. But one of the things Trump says frustrated him and led to the breakup of their friendship is that Epstein was stealing young women who worked at the Trump spa for Epstein's home. And so knew about the girls could technically apply to that. But ultimately, we don't know much there. The White House denies that knew about the girls means anything at all. But that is just one of the many questions people have. And one of the reasons why you see all these Democrats who are coming out now on this, and some Republicans. Now, you're probably going to see a waterfall of Republicans vote for this today in the House. They now have the permission of President Trump on this. You'll see it then go to the Senate. But again, Trump insists here it was a longtime friendship that ended more than 20 years ago. He didn't know about anything. But the continued sort of opposition the White House has had here has led to a lot of speculation. And so how much clarity will we get out of this? That's the big question. The story hasn't gone anywhere. As much as Trump has tried to push it off, ignore it, he gets annoyed every time he gets questions about this. You'll see him in the Oval Office, sort of like even his body language. He's like, I don't want to talk about Epstein anymore. And yet, one of the reasons we're still talking about Epstein is because they didn't release anything over the summer. So still a lot here, including questions about, is there anything more there to Trump? Because as Trump brings up and others have brought up, well, the last 4 years, another president named Biden was in charge. And Trump has said, well, if you guys had anything on me, or if there was anything on me, well, Biden had an interest in leaking that or releasing it or putting it out there because that may have helped them win the election. So even more evidence there's nothing more here or no there as far as anyone's concerned. But that's the big question. What else is in there? And today in the U.S. House, we may begin the latest process to learning a bit more about all of that.
Okay, now to a story getting a ton of attention over on our Instagram page involving screens and our kids. But for once, we're actually not talking about smartphones. Instead, a professor and author is sounding the alarm about Chromebooks in the classroom. Psychology professor and author Jean Twenge, she just wrote a new guest essay in the New York Times, and she argues that these school-issued devices that have become increasingly popular are actually hurting kids' academic performance, and that they don't have a lot of the parental controls that devices given by parents would have. So Twenge looks at test scores, standardized test scores in the US that had been rising for decades until around 2012, which is when they began to slide. They hit their lowest point in 2 decades in 2023, 2024. So she says, yes, the pandemic certainly accelerated the trend, not just in the US, but around the world, as did smartphones, which are pulling students' attention away from learning. But now many schools have banned smartphones. And she says this isn't a complete solution because phones aren't the only electronic devices that students use at school. Nearly every middle and high school student, and a good number in elementary as well, bring a laptop or tablet to school and then use it at home for homework. These devices have become so intertwined into the curriculum and day-to-day classroom environment that they're actually hard to just ban outright or to even take away. And I was saying the controls on them are not so great. There was actually a survey from Common Sense Media, and it found that 1 in 4 teens had seen porn at school, often on those school-issued devices. So she argues that fixing this starts with schools tightening controls of their own devices by limiting YouTube, games, and streaming, and also blocking sites that kids use to get around the blocks. She's also calling on teachers to reduce assignments that require computers, because research does show that students have better comprehension when they take handwritten notes compared to taking notes on their computer.
One of the things that is brought up in this op-ed piece is that there's increasing support for parents having the option to opt out of these electronic devices. And there are some districts that are looking to eliminate school electronic devices entirely, especially among those younger age brackets. There's been this impression, Jill, and this probably goes back, 20 plus years to the sort of era we were kind of in high school, and these first devices, the first types of devices came out, is to get technology in the hands of kids as soon as possible. And that's been the sort of overriding philosophy for more than 2 decades here, that teaching kids technology will give them a head start for a world that has a lot of technology in it. But it's interesting, Jill, because we put up a link to this op-ed piece over on our Instagram page, and we're probably like 500 to 600 messages in so far from parents, from educators who are also parents. And there are very few issues where you see nearly everyone come down on one side, and this is one of them. And across the board, Jill, when it came to messages we got yesterday, you have teachers who are frustrated by this, people who are talking about how their kindergartners and first graders are being shown YouTube videos in class, sometimes from like very simple things. Some people had stories about how teachers are playing videos of people online reading books as opposed to the teachers themselves reading books, exercise routines where they're watching YouTube videos of people doing exercise routines or teaching an exercise routine as opposed to, again, the PE
just
teacher.
Teaching.
Right, like teaching it yourself. And here, I'm not here to insult or, say that teachers don't have a right to utilize technology in some ways, but it sounds like, and this crosses geography, this crosses age brackets from elementary to middle to junior high, where there's a frustration among parents and even an acknowledgement among teachers who say, this is not good. This is wrecking attention span here. The number of times one teacher writes in, I have to tell the students to close their Chromebooks is crazy. They are completely addicted to this. I'd be completely fine if we got rid of them altogether. This is from a 6th grade teacher in Ohio. There are others who say, we send home the Chromebooks in case of snow days so they can, do stuff. And people are like, you know what I'm okay with? Like 90s snow days where there's a snow day and they don't do anything that day. Like, that's okay. Like, kids can be kids. So it is very interesting to see sort of this trajectory. As you mentioned, we're talking about smartphones. Now we're talking about the Chromebooks and this embrace there. And that maybe the Chromebooks and putting everything on these devices is not good. And it is making it very challenging for parents at home to manage all of this. Now, some of them said, Jill, that they are getting like reports. They can get a report based on the use of technology, like what their kids went to, what websites they went to. There can be punishment for going to games or, God forbid, porn or what are these other, things that kids are seeing. But it was just fascinating to get all these notes. I got another one from a woman who said her son is in the second grade. I'm appalled by the use of screens. My husband and I try so hard to break him of screen addiction. This is a second grader, but he tells me both subs and teachers are putting on the most ridiculous, mind-numbing YouTube videos for them during the day. I am dismayed and disheartened by it because we have an exceptional school. And this is something we heard a lot too, that this is across the board from some of the best school districts in the country. They're seeing this as well.
As a parent of a second grader, I could tell you I find it to be incredibly frustrating. I have gone so far out of my way not to get my daughter an iPad when so many of her friends have them. And here she's at school getting this Chromebook, and she got one in kindergarten. So I asked her today what she uses the Chromebook for. So I just moved, and she said in the new district where we are, it's very limited. They really don't use the Chromebook very often. She said in where we previously were, the Chromebook had games, and I know they used to always watch YouTube videos and things like that. So yeah, it is very frustrating. And as a parent, it really does feel like there's nothing that you could do about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because we got another note from an elementary school teacher who wrote in saying the problem is with state assessments. Many of them are on computer, so they need to be using this technology because the state assessments use this technology. And we also got the case from some teachers, special ed teachers, who say, this is there is valuable software for kids with learning disability or learning difference. So there are definitely use cases here, but I think the pushback you're seeing is a sort of this across the board use everywhere, and this sort of reliance on devices for, at times, things that, again, we sort of used to rely on teachers to do themselves. So sometimes, Jill, we'll post a story and we'll get like one message about it. And then sometimes we get 500 messages about it. So this clearly struck a nerve, and it was, again, fascinating to see this. And, it's similar to how we, have been talking about the smartphone conversation before. We were early on this like 3 years ago, and we see this sort of blowing up. I wouldn't be surprised if you see the same thing, this sort of kind of pushback on Chromebooks happening, if it's not already happening by you.
Well, I'm on the education beat, Moshe, so I will, of course, keep everybody posted if I see any changes on my end. All right, time for the speed read. A big visit to the White House today from Saudi Arabia's crown prince. From CNN and Politico, President Trump planning to receive Saudi Arabia's powerful crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, at the White House. With all of the trappings of a state visit, including a welcome ceremony in the morning and a formal dinner in the evening, Trump has been calling it more than just a meeting. He said, "We are honoring Saudi Arabia, the crown prince." Plans include a welcome ceremony involving military bands, a bilateral meeting in the Oval Office, and a black tie dinner, as I mentioned, in the evening. And even though the White House is pulling out all the stops, the visit cannot technically be classified as an official state visit. And that is because Prince bin Salman is not Saudi Arabia's head of state. That position is occupied by his dad, 89-year-old King Salman. But his son, the crown prince, has pretty much assumed all day-to-day responsibility for running the kingdom. He attends summits and other diplomatic engagements as the country's leader. Given that his father is effectively incapacitated, the meetings Tuesday will mark Prince bin Salman's first visit to the White House in more than 7 years. Trump has been trying to cultivate a close relationship with the kingdom's de facto ruler. One reason is that he is hoping that he'll decide to establish diplomatic ties with Israel. That would be a major advancement of the president's signature Abraham Accords, a longtime goal of President Trump's. Trump also confirmed Monday that he'll allow Saudi Arabia to buy F-35 stealth fighter planes as they firm up a new security deal.
Jill, you mentioned 7 years since MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, was at the White House. Why 7 years? Well, he visited back in 2018 during the first Trump administration. But then a few months later, there was the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi at a Saudi consulate in Turkey. Now, Khashoggi, in addition to being a journalist and being Saudi, was also a legal U.S. resident, had done work for the Washington Post and other media organizations. And a CIA assessment afterwards found that Prince Mohammed bin Salman likely ordered the assassination of the journalist, though he has denied involvement for years. Effectively, it's understood that that didn't happen, couldn't happen, without his involvement, without his approval. So there was this idea of cutting off the Saudis. Certainly, President Biden campaigned on that back in 2020. He said that he would make Saudi Arabia a pariah for its human rights record. But then even when he was in the White House, you saw he fist bumped with Mohammed bin Salman. A recognition, of course, that it's hard to get things done in the Middle East, given Saudi Arabia's wealth, given their power, given their influence. And enter Trump here, who doesn't really care about human rights issues. He's more of a pragmatist, more of a realpolitik practitioner of international diplomacy. And so for him, it's about their money, it's about their power, it's about their influence. And so you did see in the spring, the first visit Trump made as president in the second term was to the Gulf, including to Saudi Arabia. There was the elaborate pageantry, a fighter jet escort, an honor guard, golden swords, a fleet of Arabian horses accompanying Trump's limousine as he arrived there in Saudi Arabia. And the president has been very focused on deepening these ties, especially with the Gulf states, with the Qataris, with the UAE, with the Saudis. And it all comes against the backdrop of Trump's larger initiative. You mentioned the Abraham Accords. He wants more and more countries from the Arab and Muslim world to have relationships with Israel. And even during Biden, the Saudis started to get pretty close to signing those accords. But then enter October 7th, the Hamas attack on Israel and the subsequent war that unfolded there. And one of the reasons Hamas launched October 7th, by the way, was to kill Saudi Arabia's embrace of Israel. They were successful in that endeavor. And so there's always been this idea that in exchange for selling the Saudis, for example, the F-35s, for a civilian nuclear program, it appears there will be a deal announced on that here as part of this visit, that the Saudis would then in turn recognize Israel. You would then have the home of Islam, recognizing the Jewish state and sort of a new Middle East. But in the aftermath here of the war, in the aftermath of, frankly, everything that's unfolded here in the past couple of years, it appears the administration, the U.S. administration, is separating these out. And so they're going to make this deal with the Saudis with sort of the hope that they'll get there on Israel. It is interesting, the F-35 sale, because there's always been this understanding that the U.S. gives its best technology, its best military technology to the Israelis. In this case, the Saudis are going to get some of our newest, best planes. Now, that's going to take a while. They got to build the planes. They got to train the Saudi pilots. So this ain't happening immediately here. And a future president could freeze this because it's going to take a while before the F-35s, if they get to Saudi, are actually of use to the Saudi Air Force. But this would be the third major military package, arms package, that Trump has signed with the Saudis going back to his first term. There's a $142 billion arms package that was preceded by a $120 billion arms package. So just a huge amount of weapons and support. The Trump administration and the U.S., through Biden, et cetera, have given the Saudis here. Remember, one of Saudi Arabia's key arch nemeses in the region, Iran. They'd be familiar. And so ultimately, when it comes to the Israelis, the Saudis, the Americans, one thing they all share in common, well, concern about Iran. So this nuclear arrangement, civilian for power, energy purposes only, Saudi Arabia, along with these fighter jets, just in case Iran isn't behaving. You see that their lines continue to be built up there.
And adding to the sensitive dynamic of the visit, Trump's personal financial interests in the region, the Trump Organization, run by his sons, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, is involved in major real estate projects in Saudi Arabia. And Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, also has significant business ties to the country. His investment fund, Affinity Partners, has raised billions of dollars in capital from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, it's led to major questions about the ethics of all of this, that the sons here, the company, profiting off the father. But the White House has denied repeatedly any inappropriateness. But this is something that Democrats have vowed to investigate here, especially if they can win a majority in the House or Senate next year in the midterms. They will investigate to what extent there have been sort of profiting or billions of dollars made by the Trump Corporation based on the foreign policy being executed by the White House. So certainly something you'll be hearing about as well with this visit.
Another international story we're watching from the New York Times. The UN Security Council on Monday approved President Trump's peace plan for Gaza, a breakthrough that provides a legal UN mandate for the administration's vision of how to move past the ceasefire and rebuild the Gaza Strip after 2 years of war. The council's vote, also a major diplomatic victory for the Trump administration. For the past 2 years, as we have seen this conflict between Israel and Hamas raging on, the U.S. has been pretty isolated at the UN over its support for Israel.
Yeah, one of the few countries that continues to support Israel at the UN, where the votes overwhelmingly have gone against Israel in recent years, well, decades, really, given the makeup of the UN. Now, what's interesting here is sort of like the UN sort of getting behind a deal that's been out there for a while. It's sort of the story of the UN as they've become increasingly ineffective over the course of the past few decades. But one key aspect of this is a number of the countries that the U.S. is looking for support from and looking for troops from as part of this Gaza stabilization force, namely Egypt, Indonesia, Turkey, the UAE. They all said, for our populations to get behind this, it can't just be us as a government doing this with the U.S. We need the UN to put its stamp on it so we can then have to tell our people, well, the UN is making us do this. The UN needs us to do this. And so this vote yesterday about optics.
Now to two big stories regarding air travel. From the AP, the FAA has officially lifted all restrictions on commercial flights that were imposed at 40 major airports during the shutdown, the country's longest in history. Airline leaders have expressed optimism that operations will rebound in time for the Thanksgiving travel period now that the FAA has lifted its order.
Yeah, that period beginning this week for some of you, because Thanksgiving, just a little over a week away. But a reminder, there is still a major shortage right now when it comes to air traffic controllers, in the numbers in the thousands, especially in the New York area. And this all existed before the shutdown. So always double check your flights. And Jill, you want to say it with me?
Pack your patience. Sticking with travel, the Trump administration is killing a Biden proposal that would have required airlines pay passengers up to $775 in cash for significant travel disruptions within the airline's control. The Transportation Department is officially withdrawing that cash compensation rule. The Biden administration introduced it about a year ago. In addition to cash compensation, the rule would have guaranteed meals, lodging, some ground transportation, and other necessities for travelers delayed 3 hours or more.
So we learned all of this last week in a document filed by the Transportation Department. It said that the federal law did not authorize the agency to require reimbursements or compensations for flight disruptions. They say, we're going to let the airlines figure it out amongst themselves. We'll let them compete for services. We will not mandate this anymore. Remember, this was a big thing for Pete Buttigieg. He discussed it on the podcast this summer. For Biden, creating sort of these rules for the airlines, these mandatory rules for years, passengers, those of us taking flights have suffered here. And so the feeling was they got to create some rules and that ultimately that would lead to better behavior here by the airlines. But the airlines have resisted this. They said this is going to result in higher fares. This is going to be a problem here. Their trade association, their lobbying organizations have said, we already provide relief to inconvenienced passengers. This is beyond the pale here. Now, Democrats point out, by the way, that the new Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, happened to be a lobbyist for BGR Group previously. Among the clients for BGR Group, the airline industry. So they say, there's a former airline industry lobbyist now at the Transportation Department. So we're not surprised by all of this. And this speaks to sort of the larger deregulatory agenda you have with the Trump administration, which you've seen from a number of Republican administrations, right? They're into less regulations. Democrats are typically into more regulations. And so that's what you're seeing here. But passenger rights advocates for years have argued this rule ensures a base level of care for air travelers. And this keeps in line with what the Europeans do, the EU regulations. And that's something to keep in mind, by the way. If you're ever delayed abroad on a European airline, check the rules. You're entitled typically to much better mandatory compensation if you're ever delayed on that side of the ocean. Until recently, you could have the same thing here, but not so much based on this new Trump administration move.
So the problem is that there has been so much consolidation and mergers in the airline industry that there's really not as much competition as there used to be. I mean, not by a long shot. There used to actually be dozens of airlines. Now, I think there's about four.
Four big ones, like 4 or 5 biggies.
Right. So the idea that consumers are going to have any power to demand this type of thing from airlines and choosing which ones they're going to travel with, it doesn't really make sense.
Right. Unless American, Delta, United, or Southwest changes something significantly, the others aren't incentivized to follow that route.
To the economy, specifically the job market, from courts, college graduates could be stepping into one of the toughest job markets in a long time next year. That is according to a new survey from the National Association of Colleges and Employers, which surveys employers on their hiring intentions for new college grads. And they found that hiring for entry-level jobs is likely to be stagnant next year. About 25% of employers say they plan to increase hiring. The vast majority, though, 60%, say they just plan to maintain hiring. About 14% are decreasing hiring, according to the survey. More than half of employers say the job market is poor or fair. But the big question we've all been asking, will AI replace entry-level jobs? According to the survey, not overwhelmingly, at least not in 2026. About 60% of employers say they aren't replacing entry-level jobs with AI. 25% say they're unsure if they'll be replacing roles with the technology. And only 14% said that they are talking about replacing these entry-level jobs with AI. But this is where some of the data is conflicting. If you remember back in the spring, Anthropic's CEO, he had told Axios that he thinks AI could get rid of half of all white-collar entry-level jobs. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, there's a lot of these kind of sort of stark predictions, especially from the AI world. But notably, Jill, even in your numbers, 14% saying they're discussing replacing jobs with AI, that's 1 in 6 jobs. Not insignificant there at all. So we're going to continue to watch that trend line. We did do a recent Mo News Premium workshop on this. If you're interested and you're not already a Mo News Premium member, you get access to our monthly workshops on a whole variety of topics, including, again, recently AI over at mo.news/premium. You can watch it or listen to it on the Premium podcast. So that's one jobs headline. There's another one we caught yesterday from Bloomberg that the job market is heating up, but for jobs that people usually don't want. Applications are up and turnover is down for jobs with low pay and tough working conditions. That includes prison guards, staffing agencies, as well as substitute teachers. Employers are reporting a pickup in applications for roles that often are overlooked or hard to fill based on low pay or inconsistent hours or unpleasant conditions. But even jobs like sorting recyclables at various plants by hand are getting more takers right now. Apparently, in a number of those roles, the wages have gone up significantly, 27%, according to Bloomberg here, according to one statistic. And so just given the state of the market, sort of a sign of our times, they are seeing more people apply for some of these jobs that they had a hard time filling in recent years.
And finally, from PBS, Ken Burns, one of the most influential storytellers in American history, is back with a massive new PBS series called The American Revolution. It premiered over the weekend. It is a 6-part, 12-hour deep dive that reframes the revolution not just as a distant, uplifting founding myth, but as a messy, violent, and deeply human struggle over identity and democracy. Burns goes far beyond the familiar storylines. He highlights the competing loyalties, the civil war within the war, the role of Black Americans, indigenous nations, immigrants, and he explains why so many people wanted to stay loyal to the British crown. It's a project that he started a decade ago, and he told us that the themes of division, civic strain, and competing visions of America feel strikingly relevant today. So Moshe, I know you sat down with Ken Burns for a new conversation about why this story matters right now and what he hopes audiences will take away as the country heads into another political season. What feels like a never-ending political season.
We're constantly in election mode here. It was a fascinating conversation, Jill. For those of you who haven't listened to it already, it is in this main feed. You can also check it out on the Mo News interview podcast feed. It's easier to find our conversations there. And what's interesting is in this documentary, which I got a preview copy of the 12 Hours, Jill, so it's something I binged recently. He really pushes back on the idea of the clean, patriotic origin story. He tells us of the chaos, the contesting ideas, as you mentioned, makes an interesting case for why, so many people at the time wanted to stay loyal to the British crown. He also talks about, the whole taxation without representation thing. We were actually paying 1/28 the taxes that the average British person was paying back in Great Britain. So the Brits were like, why are you guys so concerned about the taxes? Like, you literally pay a couple cents on the average dollar of taxes that we pay. He also talks about how it was like literally the group of richest men in America who sort of got together here, including George Washington. And they all wanted to own land past Appalachia. And the British were like, no, you're getting us into wars with the indigenous nations there. Please stop that. So how land owning got into the mix. But it's not to say that he's here to sort of pop the myth or break the bubble. He talks about how amazing America was as a concept and how inspirational it was. And I'll play a clip of that in just a second. But what he likes to get at, and something we like to get at in this podcast, and it's one of the reasons why I love the conversation with him, is he talks about the area of gray here, that things are complicated. Life is complicated. History is complicated. There are great aspects and there are negative aspects. And to really understand our story, you have to understand all of it. With that said, here's a bit of what Ken had to say in our interview recently.
To provoke thinking and questions, I said that the American Revolution was the most important event in world history since the birth of Christ. I was just out on the road and I said that. It was great because it sort of invites kind of active and more vigorous and muscular conversation. Our investment in the pride of the revolution is sort of so superficial. It's sort of kind of encrusted with the barnacles of sentimentality. And we don't realize what a violent thing it was, and a world war and a civil war and all those things. But we also know that when it started on April 19, 1775 on Lexington Green, the chances of success were zero. And that the fact that you would take this clash between Englishmen over their rights that would then get blown out into universal rights, it's a big deal. And those universal rights are going to open the door for everybody. It is the most significant event. Certainly it sponsors centuries of revolution that follow it. And the ideas that are embedded in the second sentence of the Declaration, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. So Jefferson meant all white men of property free of debt. But the word all, that's like the breaking down the walls of Jericho. Like whatever it is, it's over. Like slavery, 80 and 9 years later, it's going to be over, but it's over. Women, equality, 144 impossibly long years, but they're going to get the vote.
So that's just a bit of it, Jill, with his provocative prompt, America, the best thing since Jesus Christ was born. And the impact it had on hundreds of revolutions around the world. He says he gets pushback from people sometimes being like, okay, what do you think was the most impactful thing since Jesus? They're like, the French Revolution. He goes, well, how do you think the French Revolution happened? It happened because of the American Revolution, and so on and so forth. So, he's there just sort of to put out some of those provocative prompts. At some point, Jill, we talked about just how insane it is that America actually came to be, given we had a 0% chance of success at the beginning of the war. And there were so many points when the Brits, with just sort of like a quick move, could have just ended the whole thing. George Washington got away, off of the Battle of Long Island in Brooklyn. If the Brits had just said, hey, we're going to arrest this guy, the whole thing is done in 1776. It's a remarkable thing that the Americans end up winning this war. We get into it in the podcast. If I haven't made you interested yet, I have failed. Check it out.
If you can't sell this, you're not selling anything.
If I can't sell this, what are you even doing listening to this podcast? Anyway, the whole doc, 6 parts, 12 hours. My conversation with Ken, 1 hour on this podcast feed.
Dare I admit I have not listened yet, but you have finally sold me, Moshe. I'm in. I will listen on the train ride into the city for tonight's big premium happy hour.
Yes, premium. If you're not premium, what are you doing? What's the holdup? If you're in New York City and you want to meet us, you want to ask us questions, Jill and I will be doing a premium meetup in Manhattan tonight. So make sure to join premium. And then once you join premium, you'll get a prompt on the RSVP and the location of tonight's event. So definitely check that out. Jill, as we're talking Ken Burns, as we're talking history, it brings us to On This Day in History. I mentioned a significant birthday for a famous animated figure on this day. In 1928, Mickey Mouse makes his premiere. So Mickey Mouse officially turns 97 years old today. He doesn't look a day over 5.
He looks great. He really looks great for his age.
No wrinkles on that Mickey Mouse. The Botox is great over there at Disney. Anyway, the premiere of Steamboat Willie happened on this day in 1928. Also on this day in 1963, the first touch-tone telephones. Kids, back in the day.
Where do we start?
Even before our day, you had these. Have you seen them trying to show, Gen Zers or Alpha Generation rotary phones? And they're just like, what, how do you do this? You got to spin the wheel, like spin the 8, spin the 2, spin the... Anyway, on this day in 1963, which is before Jill and I. Like, Jill and I grew up with a touch-tone phone.
No, I have memories of a rotary phone. I don't think I really
do too.
used
My
them.
grandmother had one.
Yeah, like I've seen them. And maybe
like,
perhaps used them.
The house phones were mostly touch-tone, I imagine, Jill, by the time.
It's like, how old are you, Jill?
How old are you, Jill? You're like basically an exennial. You're somewhere between Gen X and millennial. Cut it out. All right, on this date in 1968, McDonald's introduces its famous logo, the double arch M. And we end here with a bit of pop culture news. On this day in 1963, NBC's evening newscast, the Huntley-Brinkley Report, airs a piece about this group called the Beatles. Some of America learns about them for the first time based on this NBC News piece because it marks their first appearance on American television. And Jill, sort of an origin story for some millennial trauma. On this date in 1988, The Land Before Time premieres in theaters. It's an animated movie about dinosaurs. But if you're of a certain elder millennial age, like Land Before Time, there's just a lot of trauma there that you might want to discuss with your therapist.
Moshe, while I am right on top of the rotary phones, I have never seen Land Before Time.
You were too old at that point, Jill. If you're like, it's like a core thing. If you're born between I would say 82 and 86.
Considering that you're telling people to work
it's like
out
a micro-generation elder millennial thing. Those of you who know.
Given that you are telling people that they might have to be working out some of the issues from that movie with their therapists, I'm not upset that I missed this.
You missed Land Before Time. Other films may have created different trauma for your generation, your micro-generation, Jill.
A topic for another day.
There's all these animated movies they put on the 80s where these animated characters, the parents are dying. There's American Tail around there too. They threw a lot at us at a very young age back in the late 80s, early 90s.
It is still happening. Have you watched any Disney movie? No character has a normal relationship with their mother. Trust me on this one. It's very strange.
Yeah, well, what a way to mark Mickey's birthday today.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Mo News Podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It helps us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store. Those reviews really help. We appreciate them.
I guess, yeah, Dumbo, that's rough.
Frozen.
Yes.
Cinderella.
Snow
Rapunzel.
White, the stepmom's trying to kill her.
Go
I'm trying to read
through
that story to
them.
my 2-year-old now. And I'm just
they're all weird.
I'm skipping parts of the Snow White story. I'm just like, wow, this is really some really dark stuff.
Even the new stuff, it feels off. I don't know what's going on at Disney.
By the way, I saw yesterday they're making a live-action remake of Moana is going to be out next summer. What's the trauma in Moana?
It's generational trauma, I think, more than I think actually she has her family is intact.
We'll leave it there.